How's it going, everyone? Johnny here. I wanted to do a video about a question someone asked me. They asked me how I avoid and deal with the dreaded ME and CFS crash that we get. I still get them a lot, but I do have a technique that I do to try to limit them and avoid them as much as possible. Now, this goes back a few years. I did a cardiovascular pulmonary exercise test, and what that is I had a bunch of machines hooked up to me, measuring all my vitals, my oxygen, my blood oxygen, while I was on a stationary bike. And I exercised as hard as I could for as long as I could, and came back 24 hours later and did the same exact thing. And they wanted to measure the recovery or lack thereof in people with ME. And they found from numerous studies, from at this point thousands of people, that people with ME and CFS, and actually other autoimmune diseases as well, at times recovered worse than some people with lung cancer. That's what I was told from the guys who tested me. And I'll put some links in the description on a little bit more about cardiovascular testing. And what I gathered from that is I have a point where I hit anaerobic threshold rather quickly. Now, anaerobic threshold is when lactic acid builds up in your muscles from activity, and it exhausts you, and it's what tires you out. It's also known, I think, as lactic acid threshold. And that happens to healthy people as well when they're working out or doing certain physical activities. Well, with people with ME, they have found that very basic things cause us to go into anaerobic threshold. Simple things like brushing your teeth, getting out of bed to wash some dishes, or whatever it is. It's different for everybody else, but we go into anaerobic threshold very quickly. Some people are fortunate, and maybe walking around the park for 20 minutes makes them go into anaerobic threshold. And I understand that some of you are completely bedridden, and this video may not apply to you, unfortunately. And I hope all you guys feel better, and that one day this technique may work for you. But this is more for people who have early stages of ME or moderate ME, and they're still somewhat active. From that point, I got wearables. Wearables are Apple Watch, Fitbit, heart rate monitors. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. My favorite is Fitbit, and I'll go into that, onto why in a minute here. The first thing that I did is I started to chart every hour what my heart rate was. And I also started to write down every hour when my flare-ups started to happen, a flare-up of symptoms. It didn't even need to be a full-fledged crash. I just started to kind of notice when certain symptoms flared up based on certain activity. And I kind of made a baseline of what heart rate correlated with these mini crashes, flare-ups, and full-fledged crashes. And I noticed for me personally, it was about 120 beats per minute. That's going to vary for everybody. It could be 90 for one person, 150 for another. And I have to understand that that threshold can change from day to day based on sleep, stress, all kinds of things, diet. But that's the baseline that I made for myself. I figured that would be a good average. And what I've done since then is I try to stay under that heart rate at all costs. And when I reach that point, I take breaks. I rest. I drink water. I sit down. I lie down. And I break my activities up as much as possible. Obviously, sometimes you can't do that, but I try to do it at all costs. And I've noticed that not only has it allowed me to do more, it's allowed me to do things more often. I just have to stay under that threshold, my personal one. And I've noticed that I've been able to avoid these flare-ups and symptoms and avoid crashes and just full-blown major crashes that bedrids many of us, unfortunately. Another reason that I like Fitbit is because they measure your sleep. So a lot of us are asleep. We don't really know if we're getting good quality sleep until we wake up the next day. That's how healthy people feel. Well, a lot of people with ME, we just feel lousy every time because we just don't get refreshing sleep. But one way to actually measure if you're sleeping better nights than other nights is Fitbit shows you how much you're tossing and you're turning, and it kind of shows when you're awake. I think it measures your heart rate and your movement to kind of calibrate if you're awake or not. So that helped me in many ways, because in one way, I would know when I got really lousy sleep, even though I slept the whole night, and remember, I felt like I slept the whole night, I looked and my sleep was actually lousy. and I would try to limit as much as possible my physical activity for that day because I didn't sleep well. And as we all know, not sleeping well and a lot of activity causes crashes. It also helped in the sense that I was taking a medication to sleep, and I'd fall asleep and I wasn't feeling that well, but I noticed even though I was asleep, I was tossing and turning the entire night. Essentially, the medicine wasn't working. I moved to another medicine, then checked the Fitbit, and I noticed there were blocks throughout the night where I was not tossing and turning, and I was actually sleeping. So it helped me in more ways than one. And this worked for me. You should talk to your doctor, and maybe he can help you make a plan on how to avoid that threshold and that limit. And like I said, I'll put some links in the description about cardiovascular pulmonary exercise test, or CPET. And I would really like to hear what works for you guys. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that work. This is just one technique that I noticed worked for me. Obviously, I have to sleep well, eat well. There's a million things that I do to avoid crashes. But this is one technique that kind of stood out above the kind of basic things that everyone knows about. And I'd like to know if there's something that you guys do that works for you, and I'd like to try it. So if you could, please put in the comment section what you do to avoid crashes, the most important thing or technique that you do to avoid them, and what do you do to feel better during the crash. There are a lot of different ways to kind of deal with a crash, and I'd like to know how you guys do it. Until next time, I look forward to hearing from you guys, and have a good day.